Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us to another installment of our Candid Conversations, where we talk about very relevant information regarding personal finance and veteran services for all of our military community. So, my name is Heather Walrath. I'm an accredited financial counselor. I have been working with the military for about 15 years now. I'm also a military qualified financial planner and an accredited veterans rep. But on top of all those, what I really think is the most important is I'm a military spouse. So my husband just retired about a year ago after 26 years of service. We just transitioned. He's gone through this VA process. And the point today is just to kind of share a little bit about the process so it won't be so intimidating and we can get the veterans the benefits and the compensation that they deserve. So I am with you today on behalf of Navy Mutual Aid Association. Hopefully you've heard of us. Been around for 145 years. I am with the Education and Veteran Services side of the house. So, whereas you might be familiar with our insurance products, we also have a mission to educate service members on matters of financial security and to help the community and especially our members secure the survivor benefits that they have earned through their service. So, that is really our specialty. We also do veterans claims for any veteran. So, give us a call if that is something that we can assist you with. Or if we can assist you, we will certainly make some recommendations, some referrals about some other organizations that might be able to assist. So I am going to talk about money, right? But know that, of course, I don't know your personal situation. So I do encourage people to reach out to a financial advisor, to a community personal financial counselor that can help really integrate all the pieces of your unique situation and help you understand. Some options to do with your money, some tax mitigation strategies, and things like that. Everything we're going to talk about today is current, but of course, laws and policies always change. So I do encourage you to reach out when the time comes to see if there have been any changes in any of these policies that we might discuss today. So let's start with some misconceptions that I often hear from veterans about going through the VA disability compensation process. So, first of all, sometimes I hear people mention, oh, I didn't serve long enough to qualify. If you served, you qualified in most situations. Typically, it's only a 90 days of service. Even there's some exceptions there if you got injured in basic training or something like that. So don't think that you didn't serve long enough to qualify. I'm pretty sure that you did. Now we get this one a lot. There's nothing wrong with me. Well, that word wrong is open to a lot of interpretation, right? And even if you are still able to function fairly well, hold down the job, that doesn't mean that you're not dealing with things physically or mentally that you didn't have before you came into service. So, think about that. How did service change you? Is that something that needs to be addressed? Is it affecting your day to day life? Does it deserve that compensation? So, don't discount anything that you might still be struggling with, even if you feel that you're pretty high functioning in the workplace. We almost also get a misconception that veterans who receive disability compensation are not allowed to work. And that is not the case in the majority of individuals. So many, many people are getting disability compensation and are still working full time. Also, you will still get your full retirement pay. Now, we'll talk about some offsets that could occur, but there's no way that if you're getting a military retirement, that if you apply for VA compensation, that you will end up with less money. You might end up with a part of your VA or part of your retirement pay that is not taxable, so it could only be an advantage, right? I get this one a lot. There are other people worse off than me. Of course there are. There's always people that are worse off than your particular situation. But that doesn't mean that your situation is any less. That doesn't mean that what has happened to you is not important. So there's not just a finite amount of money every year that the VA gets out, and once it's gone, it's gone. If you didn't get your claim and you're not getting anything, it doesn't work that way. Okay, so even though there are people worse off than you that might struggle more than you do, if you are due that compensation, that's okay to take it. You're not taking away from anybody else. Also, there's no limit as to when you can apply. It is a little bit easier to make the connection that we need to make to service, being a factor in a condition that you have, the sooner that you file. But I've had individuals that have filed 20, 30, 40 years after they left service and have still been entitled to some compensation. So if that's you, if it's been quite a while since you served, it's still not too late to file. And if you're serving in the Guard of Reserves, yes, you are still able to file a VA disability claim. So those are some misconceptions. So if anyone listening, sharing with me today, has been thinking those things, hopefully, kind of an understanding of how those don't apply will help you move forward in this process. So, why would you want to apply? Well, first of all, any type of VA disability compensation is tax free. So, who doesn't want tax free money, right? But above and beyond that, there are many reasons why it's important to have a service connected disability documented with the VA. And we'll talk about all these things a little bit later, but it does enable you to use a VA home loan without having to pay a funding fee if you have a rating of at least 10%. There are also education and vocational programs that you might be eligible for based on your rating. Also, depending on your ratings, there are programs available for eligible spouses and dependent children. And of course, states have benefits as well. So we have the big VA, federal government, but states also provide additional benefits for veterans. And oftentimes, the benefits they're entitled to are based on particular ratings. So it could open up another set of benefits available to you at the state level. Also, for federal jobs, there's something called a veteran's preference that might help you get ahead of the line if all qualifications are the same. Having that veteran's preference might help you get into that federal job area if that's what you're looking for. And then, of course, we've got all kinds of other things, including increased priority for VA healthcare. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But all of these things here are based on an individual's disability rating as determined by the VA. So I would encourage you when you go to file a claim that you do work with an accredited veteran service representative. And that is what we are here at Navy Mutual. And this means that we have individuals here who have been recognized by the Department of Affairs as knowledgeable in their understanding of the process and can help a claimant apply for any benefits that they may be entitled to. So we can help with an initial claim, and any veteran, accredited veterans reps can do this initial claim, appeals, or if you have an adverse decision, following up on that, right? Most of this representation that's provided on the initial benefit is by VA recognized VSOs, and those are representatives. If someone is charging you to file that initial claim, they are not actually accredited. And that's important to understand because unfortunately, there's a lot of people that try to profit off of our veterans, making claims that they can guarantee you a certain rating if you pay them a certain price. And that's absolutely not true. Nobody can guarantee anything, and no one should be charging you to do initial claims. So that should be a red flag if anyone is giving you a bill for providing veteran services. So when should you engage with a VSO? So, the VA Office of General Counsel does maintain a list of all individuals and organizations that are accredited veterans representatives. So, at any point that you're eligible to file a claim, you can go to that list and find someone to work with you. Now, I will say you're under no obligation to stay with the same person. I always like to equate this to working with a realtor if anybody's bought a home. Sometimes it's personality driven, right? If you're buying a house and you've got a realtor that's just not really listening, they're showing you houses out of your budget, out of the area that you want that don't really fit your criteria, you're just getting frustrated. It's okay to walk away and get a new realtor. right? Same thing here. If you're working with someone and you just don't feel that they are truly being your advocate, that they are truly working with you and helping you in presenting your claim, you are under no obligation to stick with them. You can always engage with another representative. But again, beware of these unaccredited individuals who are holding themselves out to be authorized to do so and are charging you, right? Because that's really important. So check the list, make sure the person that you're working with is truly accredited. So, what do you actually need to file a claim with the VA? Now, remember, there's a lot of documentation required because this is about connecting anything you have with your service. So, of course, you're going to need treatment records of services that you received while you were in the military. And this can be from many different locations. You might have your family practice clinic, your specialty clinic, your dental clinic, behavioral mental health records. They could be all different places. So you might have to do a little bit of detective work, right, to kind of track some things down to make sure that you get copies of all of these relevant files. And this could even be with private healthcare providers that you saw while you were on active duty. So that's your first piece of homework to gather all of this documentation. Um, all the VA claims are going to be submitted online, so having a digital copy is very helpful. If you don't have a digital copy, bring in what you have, and your VSO can typically scan that in and make it a digital copy. But beyond medical records, there's other things that are going to be needed as well. You definitely need your service records. So your DD 214, right? That will show your periods of service. And if you've had multiple periods, then of course you're going to need multiple periods of or multiple DD 214s. Perhaps you're a reservist that came on and off active duty. Having a history of that, the orders are going to be very important. All right. So that's essential because we have to connect what happened to you or what you're still suffering from to specific times in service. Also, something that could be helpful are buddy statements. Now, this is not something that says, "Hey, Joe was just a stellar soldier. I would go into combat with Joe any day. He's my go-to guy." This is more, let's say that you feel like you have sleep apnea, but you never actually got that diagnosed while you were on active duty. But let's say on the deployment, you snored so bad, right, that everybody knew you probably had some sort of sleeping disorder. So then you get Steve, your buddy at the time, to say, "Yeah, I remember when, Joe would wake up pretty groggy, slept real restlessly, really snored, never seemed like he was rested." Even if you never really got an official diagnosis from a medical provider, that buddy statement could substantiate the fact that you actually were suffering from that on active duty. Maybe, you were out, on a deployment and you were jogging, doing some PT, and you stumbled on the uneven terrain there and sprained your ankle. Well, there wasn't really medical services readily available. It was for more serious type stuff. So you just wrapped it up, you put some ice on it, but you still have effects from that today. You're not sure if it actually ever really healed correctly, right? So it's not in your record that you sprained your ankle, but maybe you got a buddy that can substantiate that to say that that happened, right? Also, you got to have family documents, not because the VA is in your business, but you may be entitled to additional documentation if you are providing support for dependents. So, if from day one you can provide information that you're married, that you have children, what their ages are, go ahead and submit that with your claim so that when your claim is finalized, it's already in there. And from the first day, they can pay you with that additional compensation. Also, everything from the VA is going to be direct deposit. So having that bank account information again initially to provide when you first submit the claim, then they will have it from day one when they're ready to make a payment to you. So, what can you claim? Right? And this is always a hot question. People want to know what can be claimed. Well, remember, you entered into your military service with a presumption of soundness, meaning you were of sound body, of sound mind when you made this commitment. Now, once you leave service, the purpose of this VA disability compensation claim is to address the way that your service changed your body and your mind. Okay, so that's what we are looking for, how things have changed as a result of your service. So, when you put this claim in, what we want to focus on is connecting an existing condition to your time in service. Okay. And again, evidence of that connection can come from many sources. It can be in your medical records, it can be in your buddy statements. But a VSO can truly guide you through that process of explaining what you need to substantiate that claim and connect any issue you have to your service. It's always important too to emphasize that we're focusing on a condition, not an exposure. Okay. Just because you were exposed to something does not necessarily give you a rating. Okay. For example, perhaps you were exposed to Agent Orange, but lucky for you, you never experienced any adverse reactions. No cancer, no asthma, no nothing in terms of health related effects, right? Well, just your exposure is not going to give you a disability rating. Okay. Same thing with burn pits, right? There was a lot of activity or interest related to burn pits when we had the burn pit registry, right? So, again, simply filling out that registry that, yes, I was exposed, that is not enough. There has to be some sort of condition. Maybe you've got asthma, maybe you've got lung cancer, right? Um, and then a use of a medication, right? That again is not necessarily going to give you a rating. But if you had a side effect because of that, right? Same thing with COVID, right? Having COVID while you're on active duty does not necessarily give you a rating. But if you got COVID on active duty and you have residual effects that is still affecting you, that potentially could be. I apologize. My screen is just jumping ahead on me. There must be a ghost in here today, or maybe karma is telling me I'm going too slow, right? But I think you understand what I'm saying here, right? Simply having exposure is not enough. We have to have some condition that maybe was related to that exposure. All right, so I briefly talked about, why you need your marriage certificate, your birth certificates of your children. If you are awarded compensation at a certain level, they will give you additional compensation if you are supporting dependents. Now, remember that this money is paid to you. This is not something that is paid directly to your spouse, to your children, to your dependent parent. I also want to point out that there are no VA benefits that are available to former spouses. Yes, I know some things within DoD like TRICARE, perhaps portion of retirement pay, survivor benefits, that could be awarded to a former spouse, but that is not the case with the VA. Also, I want to point out that in order for you to get additional compensation because you're caring for a parent, they have to be your dependent. Again, you're caring for them. This does not mean that you still have a parent that is alive. Okay, so sometimes people get confused with that. So it is important to keep the VA up to date about the dependents that you're supporting. So, how can you check on your claim status? Again, contact your VSO. They've got access to the VA databases to see the progress of the claim, to see if they're waiting on something, to see where it is in this process. You can also go to va.gov. You'll have a login there that you can check yourself the status of your claim. Currently, e-benefits is still working. That's going to be changing soon. But you can also call the VA customer service. Yes, they have a phone number. Yes, they answer the questions. So these are all ways that are available to you to check the status of the claim. Again, my vote is to contact your VSO. When do you get a decision? Well, if I could tell you that, I'd be out buying lottery tickets, right? Because the reality is we just don't know. Okay, there are many variables. How many people are also in the queue? How many service providers are there to do exams, right? So all we can say is sometime after your official retirement or separation date. That's when you will get a decision. Now, there is a process called benefits delivery at discharge or BDD. That process was designed for currently serving service members to start this process while they're still on active duty. So you can file a BDD anywhere from 180 days to 90 days prior to your separation. That's your window there, that 90-day window. And in theory, what happens is you do a BDD claim, and your claim is supposed to get in the front of the queue, right? Your claim should be processed first so that shortly after your retirement or separation date, you will have your rating. I will say it's not always working that way. Okay, even if you file a BDD claim, you might still be waiting weeks, months to get that determination. So keep in mind that anything that you file within the first year of your separation or retirement from the military, the claim is usually going to be retroactive to your retirement or separation date. Okay, so if you miss that BDD claim window, file it when you can, file it when you have a complete application, or maybe you're just not ready, for many reasons to do a BDD, right? You just don't want to deal with that as you're on terminal leave or out processing. File it when you're ready within your first year of separation, and your pay will be retroactive. Even if you file a BDD claim, your effective date cannot be before your retirement date or your separation date. Okay, so the date would be the same. So I think that's important to point out. But decision times can vary. If you file a claim after a year, it will be effective from your date of filing. So you can ask your VSO about, whether or not you can expect any retroactive payments from that. So once you get a rating, here is where it gets a little bit tricky because it's quite confusing because each individual disability is rated on its own merit. Okay, so you might have 10 things with different ratings, but they're going to combine those to determine one overall rating. And I want to point out that you cannot be more than 100% for your total rating, right? Because you're only one person. So you can't be more than 100%, right? In VA math, the highest rating is always considered first. Okay, so that goes in first, and then they move through the remaining disability rating in order from greatest to least to calculate your combined rating. The VA rounds to the nearest 10. So there's no 55%, 45%, right? It's always going to be 50 or 40%. So they'll round up at 5 and they'll round down at 4. Okay, so that makes no sense, right? So let's look at an example. So this is veteran Sue. And on the left, you can kind of see a diagram of all the different disability ratings that she got. And if you added those together, that comes up with 180%. All right. But again, the VA does not work that way. You don't add them together. So let's start first with sleep apnea. Okay, 50%. So she started out 100% able. Remember that presumption of soundness? So 100% able, but sleep apnea put her at 50%. Now, another 50% for mental health. Okay, so we're going to take 50% out of the 50%. So that gives us 25% still able. Now we're going to move down 30% for knee, right? So that leaves her at 17 and a half. Now we take 20% from hypertension. Now we're at 14%. And finally, let's account for that 20% rating for the upper back. So that leaves her still at 11.2% able. Well, remember the VA rounds. So technically, Sue has an 89% service connection disability, but they're only going to use round numbers. So her combined rating would be 90%. All right. So even though all her individual ratings added up to 180%, her overall rating is 90. So that is very important to understand. Now, that does make a big difference though, those percentages. So there is a difference perhaps in that 10% in terms of what you're eligible for, okay? Again, this goes beyond compensation. So rating at 10% is when you can get some compensation. Okay. Also, again, back to that VA home loan, that's the minimum rating you need to be able to get that home loan waiver. And you're in the VA healthcare priority group of three. Now, VA healthcare has 8 different tiers of priority. Okay, so all veterans are eligible for VA healthcare, but depending on your rating, that will determine your tier. Okay, so the lower the tier, the less access you have. You may have to pay for some care through the VA. You might have some income limitations. The higher your rating, the more access to free care you have with the VA. Okay, so again, at 20%, there is still a retired pay offset, and we'll talk about that in a second. But this opens the door for some vocational and education programs. Okay, at 30%, this is where you can add dependents to your award, and you've moved up to VA priority of group two. 40%, same type of benefit entitlements as 30, but again, that could vary from state, right? 50% is kind of a magic number if you're receiving a retirement from the services, because that is the point that you will get concurrent receipt. And we'll talk about that in a second. That is also the point where you move into VA healthcare priority group one, which is the highest. But then you can see as we move through, some additional benefits come in with the ratings. So if you're at 40% and you feel like maybe something wasn't addressed, or you want to make an appeal, if you could get to 50%, that is a considerable change in entitlements, right? So consider that, right? And again, the highest that you can get is 100%. P&T means permanent and total, right? And there are some specific things that also happen at that rating. Okay. So let me just talk a little bit about that offset. Remember, I said that 50% was that magic number to get concurrent receipt. All right. So, what do I mean by that? So, a member retires, they have a pension from the military, and they also get a VA disability rating. Those are two separate pots of money. Retirement money is going to come from the Department of Defense. The VA disability compensation is going to come from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Two separate checks. However, if you are less than 50% disability rating from the VA, you don't get concurrent receipt of both. There is an offset. So let's work through that a little bit. All right. And this is an example of a service retirement of $2,000 a month. Okay. So 40%, the VA disability rate for 2023 is about $812. The service retirement is $2,000. But because they're not at least 50%, there's not concurrent receipt. So there's an offset. So essentially, they will get the $812 from the VA that's not taxable, but the retirement pay is going to be offset by that amount. So the total that's coming from DOD is going to be 1188. So they're still getting $2,000 of retirement. So again, filing that VA compensation is not reducing their overall money, right? And now they're actually getting a little bit more because VA disability is not taxable. So basically, $812 of the 2000 not going to be taxable. Okay. Now, if you're above 50%, you do get concurrent receipt. So in this case, let's look at 70%. So that amount of disability pay would be about $1,800 a month. Okay, again, that's the 2023 rates. They typically go up every year, so you can check the charts for the current rate. Um, so 1804 from the VA, $2,000 from DOD. Okay, there is no offset. So this member is going to get the total 1804 from the VA plus the $2,000 from the VA, and they're going to get 3804. So you can see the difference there in more money because there's no offset. So here are some examples of the rates for 2023. And again, you can see those percentages makes a difference, right? It's over twice as much compensation if you're at 20% opposed to 10%. And then this kind of shows you at 30% where you start getting additional compensation because you have dependents. Again, I think these charts are a little confusing when it says spouse and one parent. That does not mean you have one parent that is living. That means you have one parent that you are supporting. So it's not likely that we have a whole lot of veterans that have a spouse and then are also supporting two parents, right? It's a very probably a limited number of people. So that's what that entitlement means. Not that you have the parents, but that you're actually supporting them. And of course, there is documentation that's required for that. And again, you can see these are rates without children. Rates with children go up because that's more people that are relying on you for that compensation. I do want to note that children are eligible to be dependents until age 18. After that, they will fall off your award unless you can show documentation that they are enrolled in school full time. Might be a high schooler if they turn 18 in high school, or if they're going to college. So you will have to submit documentation to keep them on your award while they're on school. After age 23, once they're out of school, they will no longer be on your award unless they are helpless. And that is the VA's term, a helpless child. That means there's someone that's incapable of self support, and that has been identified prior to age 18. So if you had a child that something happened to them, let's say they're in college, something happens when they're 22, they're not going to continue to be eligible. Okay. It has to be prior to age 18, that determination. Okay. But again, it's important to keep all this updated. All right. So you do see again the difference though between 80% and 100%, right? That's about $1,700 more. So, if you feel like you did not properly have things addressed when you made your claim, there's always room to go back for a reevaluation. But make sure that you are keeping the VA up to date to avoid a debt, meaning an overpayment. So, if you got divorced, if your children age out, if your child joins the military or gets married, all of those reasons they are going to come off your award. And VA may not know about that, right? But if at some point they do find out, and there's various ways that they might, you would have a debt. You would have to repay anything that was paid to you when you weren't actually entitled to that. Now, it could also work the other way, right? Maybe you had a baby. Maybe you got married as a veteran, right? And so now you are supporting other people. Maybe you adopted children. So you need to notify the VA of that as well so that they could add them to your award. So it's really important that you keep that status up to date. Okay. Now, after you file that initial claim, again, you can always go back and have things reevaluated. However, I do want to point out that it's not likely, but it's possible to actually get a decrease. Okay, so let's say, for example, that you had a rating of 20% for your knee, and you feel like your knee has just gotten a lot worse, right? It's just bothering you a lot more. You used to run, now you can't even run, you have to walk. So you want to get that reevaluated. So you go in, you have another exam, and that doctor says, well, actually, it looks like, there's more muscle mass here now. Actually, it looks like the ligaments are a little bit tighter. Actually, it looks like your knee is better than it was a year ago, 5 years ago. It's possible that then they could then decrease your rating. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Again, not always likely, but there are situations. Nothing is permanent until you've had it 20 years. Then it would not be reduced. Now, there also are situations where you might be right out the door from the beginning, categorized as permanent and total. Okay. But if it's a new issue, apply as soon as possible because, again, the closer to your time of service, the more likely you're going to be able to connect those dots that was actually related. Okay. Many veterans have ailments, conditions that they suffer from as a result of aging, right? So just because you have arthritis that starts at age 60 and you are a veteran, that does not necessarily mean you're going to get compensated because that could just be a part of natural aging, not a part of your service. On the other hand, if you injured yourself, you had a lot of knee problems as a result of falling when you were on active duty or the heavy packs that you carried, and that's gotten worse and worse as you age because of the catalyst that happened when you're on active duty, that could be a claim. right? So just because you're sick, just because you're a veteran does not necessarily mean that is connected to your service. So let's address the PACT Act. Okay, it's been over a year now since that went into effect. But what this did was it gave very specific responsibilities to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to make access to care and benefits a little easier to those that were exposed to burn pits and other toxic substances. Okay. So, what this did was it allowed the VA to make a direct connection to service if you were exposed and had a condition. Okay, there was no longer the fact that you had to actually prove that's what caused it. Now there's a presumption. If you're exposed, you have this condition, it's automatically a service connected condition. Okay. What are we talking about? So here's an example of 20 conditions that someone might have that if they were exposed to a burn pit, then it's automatically assumed that there's that causation. Okay, so again, this is really relevant because maybe it's somebody, you know, back in the early 90s was exposed to burn pits, right? And they had this diagnosed with lung cancer 20 years later. Well, before the PACT Act, they really had to prove that there weren't other things that might have caused this lung cancer. Like, maybe they smoked, or maybe, a job that they had after the service, in a coal mine or something, right? Now we've got that link, right? So they don't have to prove that it was related to service. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't other things, but these are a list of presumptive conditions that will automatically qualify. If you have any of these conditions now, since the PACT Act has passed, you can do a new or supplemental claim to an original file. So let's just talk briefly about VA healthcare. Remember at the beginning, I was talking about there's tiers of care, right? Now, keep in mind that VA healthcare is a separate program from VA disability benefits. So, the Department of Veterans Affairs is a very big house with lots of different rooms. Okay, so when you apply for VA disability, you're only in one room of the house. It doesn't give you access to all the other rooms. All right, so you have to enroll in VA healthcare, and there is a separate process there. And this is important because healthcare is often a huge cost for separatees that might not be eligible for TRICARE. Again, every veteran is eligible for VA healthcare, but your priority of care is going to be based on your rating. Okay, so that's important. Um, a veteran who's also eligible for TRICARE, who is retired, can use both. And there may be reasons that they would want to do that. Maybe they're very happy with the doctor they have under TRICARE as their primary care. But if you're seen by the VA for certain conditions that are service connected, then the VA might pay for any equipment or supplies that you need. For example, sleep apnea. Okay, let's say you have sleep apnea. When you're on active duty, you don't pay anything for your machine, your CPAP supplies. When you retire, now under the TRICARE system, you have some copays. So you might have to pay a copay for that equipment, maybe $50, $60 a month through TRICARE. All right. However, if it's service connected, sleep apnea is one of your conditions, then the VA will pay for that. So you wouldn't have to pay those copays for TRICARE, right? So that could be an important benefit. Keep in mind, though, that typically it's only the veteran that is going to be eligible for VA healthcare. There is a program called Champ VA that is healthcare for dependents, but the criteria for using that is pretty strict and pretty small. If any dependent is eligible for TRICARE, they cannot use the CHAMP VA program. So if it's dependent of a retiree who has TRICARE, they're not going to be eligible. But CHAMP VA is typically going to be for family members of a veteran who's 100% um, disabled or died from a service-connected condition. That's really the broad criteria. Of course, there's always exceptions, but in most cases, family members and dependents are not going to be eligible to use that CHAMP VA program. Home loan guarantee, right? We talked about that. Great benefit to enable veterans to purchase a home, primary residence. There is no uh, down payment required, but I do want to point out that that doesn't mean that there's no cash required. Okay, you still have to pay closing costs. All right, many people don't realize that. Closing costs are typically 3 to 5% of the loan. So, whereas you may not need a 20% down payment, cash will still be required. However, there is something called a funding fee that's typically about 3% of the loan that you pay to use a VA loan. If you have a VA rating of at least 10%, they waive that funding fee. So that could save you thousands of dollars. Now, keep in mind that you are only a veteran when you have left active duty. Okay. So you can't have this funding fee waived if you're still on active duty when you close on a house, even if you've submitted a BDD claim, right? And it's pending, even if you're on terminal leave and you feel like you've left. You can't get funding fees waived until you've closed on the house after active duty and you have a rating of at least 10%. Don't forget about your state, okay? When you get yourself settled, wherever you're going to leave post service, go to that state veterans office. Every state has a veterans office that can help you find out what you're eligible for at the state level. Things that are very common, again, based on your ratings in most cases, but you might have reduced or re-rate or waived vehicle registration fees, maybe free veterans license plates, property tax exemptions on your primary home based on your rating. Some states offer college tuition waivers for veterans and their dependents, or at least reduced fees. Um, Maybe your retirement pay is exempt based on your ratings, and then other things like housing assistance programs, free hunting licenses, fishing licenses, and things like that. So don't forget about state level benefits that could be in addition to any federal level VA benefits that you receive. GI Bill, again, I kind of like to mention this now because it's important if anyone is on active duty that they transfer that prior to leaving service because once you leave service, you can no longer transfer that. And if you do transfer it, there is an additional service commitment, typically 4 years to be able to transfer that. If you don't serve the 4 years, you may have to repay the payment. So that's very important, but this is a significant benefit. And then, of course, there's other benefits as well. So, depending on your rating and condition, there might be additional special monthly compensation. There's all kinds of things, automobile allowance. Now, this doesn't mean just because you're a disabled veteran that you get an automobile allowance, but perhaps you need some adaptation made to your car so that you can drive it, right? With the pedals or the gear shift or something like that because of a service connected condition. You might be eligible for an automobile allowance. Let's say that you have a skin condition that's related to service and you need some special ointment to protect your skin, but it also causes damage to your clothes, right? You might be eligible for a housing allowance, right? There are veterans and spouse pensions from the VA for very low income veterans that someone might be eligible for. There's access to life insurance programs without underwriting, without any medical exams. So, VA Life is a program that's available to disabled veterans for whole life without any medical underwriting. And there are also burial and memorial benefits. Now, all veterans are eligible for some memorial benefits, but there are also allowances, cash allowances, that are available based on your disability rating. So again, explore the benefits from the VA. You can go online. There's a benefits guide that they have, and depending on your rating, that might open up additional benefits for you. But remember, all of these benefits have to be applied for. If you're not sure if you qualify, give us a call. We can walk you through the process or just apply, right? All they could do is say no. But if you don't apply, you're not going to get an answer and you might be missing out on benefits. There are many benefits and they vary in different types of form. Yes, there's disability compensation, a cash payment, but there's tons of other resources and other benefits that might be available as well in addition to that. Highly recommend that you seek the services of a free accredited veteran service representative who can help you apply for the benefits, determine your eligibility, and again, there's no cost at all for you to do this. And then remember, if this is not incentive enough, but VA benefits are not taxable. So, service again does things to your body, to your mind. You deserve that tax free compensation for serving us, right? So apply, and that benefit is not taxed, which again is something that you deserve as a result of your service. So I hope you found this helpful. Again, there are lots of pieces to navigating this. So if we can be of service in any way, please reach out. All of the VSO services at Navy Mutual Aid Association are free, no cost at all. Even if you are not a member and don't have a fantastic policy with us, you can still reach out. And of course, if we can assist you with any life insurance needs, our insurance team would be happy to help you with that as well. So please reach out. Thank you for your service and please apply for the benefits that you are entitled to.